Hi, I'm Kevin McAleese. This week we're speaking with Jill Konrath about what's really possible. For over 2 decades, Jill has been an author, speaker, and expert thought leader in sales. But in recent years, she made a pivot to create positive change in our polarized world by figuring out what's really possible. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jill as much as I have. I would love to jump into this.
Okay.
I've known you for years now, and I knew you when you were doing sales. And I remember back April 2022, I got an email from you that said, "I'm quitting sales."
Yes.
And I thought, good for you. But then as I read on, I was like, oh my gosh, this is even better because you were quitting for a very specific reason. And that's like a large part of the reason I wanted to chat with you today is I think it's phenomenal what you're working on. And I'd love to talk about it. You call it what's really possible.
Yes.
So do you want to explain what it is you're focusing on now?
I'm really focusing on what's really possible. I guess if I had to take a look at my whole life and what it is, I always want to make things better. And when I was in sales, I was really working hard to make sales better and to bring in other people who were not included in sales as well.
Right.
Yeah, a few years back, I just realized that my passion for sales had totally evaporated and I was on a new adventure in life. And I choose to call things adventures because I don't always know where I'm going when I start. And
Right.
and I'm okay with that because you learn things as you go. And if you don't start, if you think you have to get it all done from the very beginning and know it, um, you'll never do anything. And what's really possible was really designed first of all because of the political polarity that I saw out there and how red state, blue state, people weren't talking to each other, and it just drove me absolutely nuts. And I at one point said to a friend who was on the opposite side of my beliefs, we were talking. We usually avoided anything that was sensitive, and but for some reason it came up and I said, Mary Jane, I am just one of those millions in the middle who believes X. And she said, so am I. And I went, oh my God, I used that with my polar opposite friend and she came toward the middle. So there's an issue of rhetoric going on right now in terms of people
Right.
falling into traps and seeing others. But that's part of the plan, I think, is to get us to otherize people. And I couldn't stand it. And then I went on a speaking engagement, and I'm from Minnesota. I went to Louisiana, very different territory. I sat next to a woman and we were talking. I said, I'm just one of those millions in the middle who believes this. And she came right toward me and,
Right.
and said, so am I. And it was like, oh, they're doing so much to pull us apart. But in reality, most of us care about certain things. We care about family. We care about, taking care of others. And we're being divided on issues. So we, can't come together to do that. So initially, and that was in 2007 that I first got the domain name Millions in the Middle in 2007. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. All I knew it was a golden phrase. And so a few years back when I was done with sales, mentally I was like, okay, I'll try to create millions in the middle now, but I couldn't create it. Something was wrong. I got started. I had people help me design a website and it felt wrong. And then I stopped and I went, no, this isn't quite right.
Right.
And then I started thinking, I went and looked because I have ADD, addictive domain disorder. when I come up with an idea, I buy the domain name because I don't know if I'll ever use it, but it doesn't cost a lot to
Right.
hold an idea. And so I went and looked at my domain names and I went, oh my God, I have what's really possible. That's more me. It's about creating and looking at what we can do as opposed to trying to, I don't know, be a political wonk and try to pull people together with all my knowledge and try to get them to see this. What I do is I like to pull people together to explore what we can create as opposed to what problems we can fix. Because I think
Right.
if you look at problems you can fix, you suck people down. It's like, oh, the weight of a problem is just
Right.
heavy. And then you get into, well, we should, or we this and that. And to me, that just, I couldn't do that. I need energy from what I'm doing too. But if I take a look and I say, well, what do we want to create? And then bring people in to look at what can we create and or give them ideas about how to look at things differently, then I feel that it's that so much more is possible. So what's really possible was my initial effort to get out there with the new Jill, who was not talking about sales and inspiring people to look at what's possible as opposed to what we currently are sitting with.
Right. And I love that you're approaching it from what can we create, because if you approach it as a problem to fix, I think most people would say, well, I don't know, look at the state of the country. I can't fix
I
anything.
can't fix anything.
I have no power,
Nope,
you know.
not
And whereas we all have the power to create
to
something.
create. Yes.
Yeah,
And
I
if
love
you
that.
go into, get people going down the problem thing, well, we can't tax more people, or we can't do this, and there's already all these things that we can't do depending on which side of the aisle you're from. But if you say, what do we want to create in the future, and what does it look like, then people can come together and start sharing ideas and coming up with ideas and thoughts that they work with together, and they shape it as they talk and explore what they can create. So to me, that's
Right.
really what's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting to me as well.
Yeah.
Um, I know in the past you've been really great about bringing people together, especially in the sales space. You created Women's Sales Pros,
Yes.
awesome women in Minneapolis. And
Yes.
in those cases, you were really working to build a community, to bring people directly together.
Hmm.
And I feel like this project is a little bit different
It is.
because you don't have access to the millions of adults in this country who
Okay.
are somewhere on that political spectrum. um, because of that, how are you approaching this differently than you have past projects?
Um, but let me just say, I'm a good instigator. Okay. If I had to define my talents, I would say I get things going.
Right.
That's what I do well, and I get ideas out there, and starting, you know, women's sales pros. I put that together because I was so tired of only hearing about sales from bald white guys, and I really like bald white guys. I'm married to one, and my father was one, but it's like, as a female, I needed to find people like me,
Right.
and and even when I finally realized that that was going on, it was like, I was hoping for some other woman to do something. I was, sitting there kind of harumphing, why doesn't she do it? She's out there, she's written a book, but nobody was. And I finally realized, oh God, I'm the one that it's bothering the most. I guess it's my job
Right.
to do it. So that's when I stepped up and started becoming visible and started publishing articles and online stuff and speaking and all that. But then I pulled people together because I wanted women in sales to hear other women in sales speaking, and so we came together. We put on couple conferences, and then the women sales pros themselves, people like me who were speakers, authors, consultants, trainers, we started getting together and creating a cohesive group through that. And then after a few years, I handed it off to Lori Richardson, who really is the one who is the community builder. I am the starter of things,
I love it.
and other people are builders. And I think we have to realize that sometimes they're very different talents.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. I don't mind publicizing things now and getting up and, speaking and doing what has to be done. But if you ask me to organize the next get together, I think I'm going to die. You know, that's really bad. I know you're talking about belonging, but I think what I do is I create ways for people to get together, and then they start, I can initiate it.
Right.
but there's more to it. Somebody else has to pick up the things because it's got to be, they've got to use their talents. I use mine.
Yeah, well, and if you're trying to cultivate belonging, that doesn't always mean community.
No.
There are so many aspects to creating a space
Yeah.
or even creating concepts that bring people in and give them the opportunity to feel connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% think it's just one stage
Yes.
in an ongoing process.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes you need that, or well, a lot of times you need that instigator
Oh yeah.
to be like, okay, something has to change.
Yep.
Nobody's doing it.
Yep.
I'll step up and do it.
Yes. I've always defined myself as a reluctant leader. I will lead. It's not something I choose to do, but it's like, oh God,
Right.
this has to happen. So I'll get out there and do what I do, you know,
Right.
talk and get people thinking differently.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like you and I are approaching, our projects in similar ways because
Hmm.
it's a lot of one-on-one conversations.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously you want to share out what you're finding, what you're discovering, but I've seen from what you've been publishing as part of this that a lot of it comes down to I bumped into someone and we had this amazing conversation. I think that's a beautiful thing because a lot of people, I think, don't think about the conversation on that level too. Like they just think, okay, we spoke, all right, it's done. And I love the way you're kind of analyzing it to or analyzing, or was that
No, that's not
overthinking?
overthinking. I'm speaking it in
Okay.
my mind, going, where did that take me, and what does it mean, and how can I leverage this? I mean, I feel like I am a storyteller at heart,
Right.
and rather than just saying here are 4 ways to do this, I really feel that you need to pull people in and what tell them what got you to that thinking. I mean, what
Right.
got you to that point where this became an issue and something you wanted to write about.
Right. What's your favorite of the conversations you've had that you've shared as part of what's really possible?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I've interviewed some interesting people. I had to stop the interviews for a while because the technology was overwhelming me, and I was still trying to get my base down. But I'm looking forward to interviewing more people. I have more ideas for other things I want to get going.
Right.
I have. You'll laugh when I say this, but I'm no spring chicken anymore. And for those who may be outside of the U.S., I'm just telling you, I'm old. Um, and I don't want to have to run a massive thing, but I do have
Right.
ideas. And one of the things, oops, sorry, I bumped my desk. It wobbles. One of the things that's been on my mind for years is a old Hopi Indian saying that when the grandmothers speak, the world will heal.
Interesting.
Yeah. When the grandmothers speak, the world will heal. I am a grandmother and I'm speaking. But I don't just want me to be speaking. I want the grandmothers to speak. I mean, if I could envision a world where, and I was reading about some Indian lore a while back too, and it was saying that when the Indian tribes in the U.S. wanted to go to war against each other, the men would get things ready to go, and then they would have to go talk to the women, and they would have to get the concurrence of the women. And if the women did not agree, then
Then it wouldn't
it
happen?
wouldn't happen. No, it had to have
Wow.
concurrence. When the grandmothers speak, the world will heal. I'm going, how can this is on my mind right now? Where am I going to go with this? But I can envision getting grandmothers together and just giving, starting out with the framework and getting grandmothers together to go do something.
Right.
Because when the grandmothers speak, the world will heal. And then I think of Pinochet, and I remember this. He was a dictator in Chile
Yep.
in the I think it was the 1980s, and I he was killing people, and if you opposed him, you were disappeared,
Right.
and you may be in jail or you may be in torture, you may be dead, but you were disappeared. And students were marching and more of them disappeared, and then all of a sudden there was a mother's march and the grandmothers were marching. And I remember hearing on the news, And I'm not sure if it was a Chilean news person or if it was the US person telling what he said, but the person said, the grandmothers are out. He's lost.
Wow.
The grandmothers are marching. So there's
Yep.
power in being an elder, and to bring our wisdom to the table and to be able to do that. So I'm going, well, I don't know where this is going. I know I started with what's really possible, but I'm looking at what's really possible if we can motivate and get the grandmothers going now. Isn't that
Right.
wild? I mean, you didn't expect that, but that's new.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I love that you're, even trying to get the grandmas involved, you are still not, you're not approaching it as I have all the
Oh,
answers
God, no.
for you.
No.
It's more, let's explore this,
Mhm.
which I feel like even just as an opener
Yep.
is so much more welcoming than,
Here's how.
I'm going to tell you how
Right.
we're going to do things.
Well, see, and I can't possibly because I know how different each of us are, and we all have different talents. We have, I mean, like I said, I'm not somebody who can keep the show going, but I'm somebody who can get
Right.
started. And some people are really good at numbers, and I mean, they,
You and me both.
oh yeah, and others, like I said, are really good at organizing and pulling people together. And I mean, I know I can do marketing, I can do sales, I could probably do fundraising if I wanted to, and all that. But I want to get people in action, working with their own talents and their own concerns. I mean, if you're concerned about the environment or the economy, I mean, we all have our different things. If you're concerned about children in Africa, if you're concerned about pets, getting people involved is probably the most important thing, especially today when so many people feel so isolated.
Right.
They don't have workplaces to go to anymore, and all the work from home and COVID knocked out a lot of social interaction that people had. And so to be able to pull people together to work on a common cause, which they define and then they own, and they can
Right.
pair up with others who are doing it. But to me, that's what I want to do. I don't
So
know where
it's,
it's going. Okay.
yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And we talked about this
Yeah.
even before scheduling
Yeah.
this particular interview. I love the fact that we're still early stages in this.
Yeah.
Um, And I would love, like, 6 months, a year from now, when you feel like you're at that point you wanted to get to, maybe when you're reaching that point where you're like, all right, this is now moving into the part of the process I don't enjoy doing as much,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
kind of sustaining and growing. Um, I would love to have you back and kind of reflect on, what went the way you thought it would, and what is entirely different than what you anticipated. Because I feel like, especially approaching this, the way you are, you're very much leaving yourself open for an opportunity to be surprised,
Yes.
that you may have in your mind, this is the approach, or this is what I think is going to help, and someone may just knock your socks off and come up with some amazing idea that
Mhm.
none of us have thought of yet.
That's why I call it an adventure, because I don't know, and I can be surprised, and it could be a setback, but that's part of the adventure too.
Right.
But it could be somebody that you meet who just opens a door to make the amazing things, or that you can connect with to do a project together that is even more expansive than what you were thinking. I mean, I'm open to what creates itself as I move forward, but I know I have to take these steps in
Right.
order to have something happen, or else I could sit in my condo and just look out. I got a
Well,
really good view. I can see the Mississippi River.
I love it. In all the conversations I'm having, listening always comes up. Like, you have, for people to feel like they belong, they have to be
Oh
heard.
gosh, yes.
And I feel like that's just like a foundation you're building off of
Hmm.
in what you're doing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this.
Let me just say
Um,
too,
yeah,
you say people need to be heard. Somebody needs to ask, and the questions are just as important as the hearing,
right.
because the questions open things up. And if you don't ask the right questions, you don't hear. You
Right.
don't create that community.
So tactically, the way you're going at this, I know you're having a lot of conversations.
Hmm.
You're not trying to build an online community or anything
Mm-mm.
specifically around this. How are you let me ask it this way. How are you transforming what you're learning into action for you? A way to share it with others. Is it the articles you're
Well,
writing,
the
the
articles are the
newsletters?
articles are the start. Um, I'll probably write another book because I,
A serial book writer, right? I love it.
sorry, serial book.
No,
Huh?
best-selling author,
Yeah,
so why
yeah,
if you've got a skill, why not bring it to
yeah.
bear?
No, and
Yeah,
and I want to move it more into not a how-to book because all my books have been how-to. But actually, I started out writing when I first started writing about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. I had lost all my business because of the Y2K thing, and I had all these clients, and they all they all said, "Hold tight, we're not doing anything right now." So I started writing, and the first book I started writing, it's actually on my Jill Konrath website. It's only a half-done novel, but it's a
right,
Harry Potter style novel on how to learn to sell.
right,
And I had more fun writing that. And then I woke up one day and went, "Oh God, Jill, you need to you need to get your work back. You can't just disappear." And then what does it take to get a book published? And it said, "Well, you have to be a speaker." I went, "Oh, shit, I hate to speak."
right.
So then I had to do all this other stuff. But I loved creating characters and doing things anyway. So I can see myself writing a fiction book that supports what I'm doing.
Ooh, I like
I do
that.
too. And it's just kind of here, and one thing leads to another, and I have no idea where I'm going. I do know I'm going there though,
Right,
which is weird to say. And people have always said, "Well, what's your ultimate goal, and how will you know if you've been successful?" I've never had an ultimate goal. I've always
right.
just kept moving forward and doing what I think is the right thing to do for me,
Yeah.
family.
Well, it's more like a journey than trying to reach a specific metric or
Yeah.
goal. Yeah,
I mean, I know I have a lot of newsletter subscribers on LinkedIn and on my website. I know, I can drive things if I want to. I need to get my act together totally and more know, and then I will take it to whatever level opens up or whatever
right,
I tip into at that point. I have no idea. I'm just
right.
along for the ride of my life. I don't know. That sounds weird.
So you're just continuing now with the interviews, right? Like just as you or I
Not
shouldn't say interviews, with the
with
conversations.
conversation.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, as you're encountering new people,
Yeah.
just continuing that and learning from it.
All the time. Reading a lot
Love it.
too, and studying some things. I mean, I've read some fascinating things what other countries are doing and leaders are doing, and it just opens my mind more to what's
Right,
possible than what we're really thinking of here in our country, because so much more is possible than what we've got going on right now. What if we could bring people together as opposed to pull them apart? What if?
right. So I want to ask if I asked someone to go, talk to 3 people about politics or anything related to like their view on the country or the world, I think most people would be a little nervous because we're so polarized.
Mhm.
How specifically are you approaching these conversations that are giving you that ability to engage without immediately triggering the othering? I know we you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I would love if somebody listening wants to start a conversation with someone else, like how should they approach it?
There's some really good books out there, and I guess that one of them is called, I think, Be Curious. I mean, I'm a curious person, and so for me to try to find out why you think that, and what we might have in common, it's a function of not coming at you and saying, "Jesus, Kevin, how can you believe that?" I mean, what idiot would think
Right.
was right, or I thought I knew you better than that. I mean, that does nothing to stifle the conversation. But if you can have a conversation, there's so much more you can learn, and you can develop a rapport with that person that you can work together. I mean, I have siblings who are very different from me in
Right.
beliefs, and yet we work on a lot of things together as family, and we can get things
Right.
done. I mean, that's if you honor the humanity in a person, which is, I
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people I know though who have those kind of differences in perspective within their family, the way they get along and the way they work together is pretty much by not talking about
think.
anything
Yeah,
controversial. Um, but you're kind of going in the other direction. Not that you're asking controversial questions,
no,
but you're really trying to tap into an area that I think most people would be afraid of,
yeah.
like, be afraid to
Family's the
bring up.
hardest. Family's the hardest. It's much easier, I think, for me to do it with strangers
Right,
because I don't have a huge vested interest, with a lifetime,
right,
kids and grandkids and holidays and all that. So I think it's easier to start with people, you're not that close to, but to practice. I mean, and the reality is, when I was in sales, I used to map out my conversations. I mean, I used to think, what questions can I ask people to really understand what they're trying to achieve and what they're doing? I'd write down questions. I'd write down 10 questions before I'd go meet with a particular person. But some of those questions would be, sub questions of the initial one. So I wouldn't just, have, I wouldn't just drill through my questions,
right,
to get them answered. I would have a conversation. And through that conversation, you develop this rapport that you really truly are interested in the other person. And when you have that rapport that you're interested, then you can actually work together,
right,
you know?
right. So with the conversations you've had, are there specific questions you're leading in with? Or have they just been more organic
They
encounters that you're building from?
Yeah, they're organic in a lot of ways. But let me just say they're organic probably because I've spent a lot of my life focused on asking questions.
Right.
Um, yes, I have. It just made me laugh because I remember going out and dating in high school, and I was such a nervous wreck, and I wanted the guys to like me and maybe ask me for a second date. That's how I measured my success. If a
Right.
guy asked me out, but I was such a nervous wreck, I didn't know what to talk about. So I would actually write down questions
I love it.
before I went on a date, and I would put the questions. Well, I would read them, and it was fine. And then I'd get on the date, and my head would just like, I forgot. So then I started putting them in my purse, so
It's beautiful.
that I could refer to questions. And then, like if I was sitting at McDonald's with my date in high school, which was, stopping after a game when we were at McDonald's. And then if I couldn't remember the questions, I'd say, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. And then I'd come out. And so what I'm telling you is I've thought about questions for a long time.
Right.
And
Right.
and here's another thing I learned, and this is funny. I went out with a guy, um, and I really did a good job of asking questions. And at the end of the date, he said to me, "Wow, Jill, it's been so fun being out with you. We have so much in common. Let's go out again." And I went, he doesn't know a thing about me. He doesn't know a thing about me. Isn't that weird?
But he felt heard,
He felt
and
heard.
that yep, he felt more connected.
Yes, simply because I really was interested. If he was in the band,
Right.
I'd ask about, what made him choose the drums, or, does it,
Right.
or if he was playing soccer, or where he was going to college. I mean, I had questions. And
Right.
to me, it's more organic right now that I can do that when I'm with people, but it's really just about trying to understand more about who they are and what got them there. And if they feel, and you're not trying to sell them anything, you're just trying to understand it. And then they recognize that you're a decent human being. You're not a critic who's
Right.
pouncing on them, and that there's a possibility of coming together and doing things.
Right. So I'm hearing, you've got to withhold judgment.
Yeah,
You've got to focus on the what can we create, like what can I understand
yeah,
versus a specific, area where you feel very different from
yeah.
them.
Hmm. But there's
Yeah.
always commonalities. I mean, the reality is there's always commonalities that can be built on. And I think, going back to the dating example, you don't start working on things together on the first date. You don't get married
Right.
or get engaged. You do have to build a relationship with that person and understand them more. The questions are, to me, are like, the godsend in all this.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
I like this. I like this a lot. Um, One thing I noticed on the What's Really Possible website, which I'll put a link to
Yeah.
it in the show notes for anyone listening, is you have a pledge up there.
Oh yeah. Don't
And
don't make me recite it right now.
oh, no, 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 no. You don't have it memorized?
No.
Oh no, I'm kidding. Was that something that you kind of led in with? Like, this is what I'm approaching this, this is how I am approaching it?
Yeah.
Or has it evolved as you've been having
Well,
conversations
that's
and
something that
been
went that was
exploring?
that went up right away when I put the website up. So it was just something that was part of it.
I love
Yeah.
it. I choose to think, live, and act in the spirit of possibility.
Mhm.
I will bring my initiative, common sense, and decency to my family, community, country, and the world. I will work with others to find new ways to solve the challenges we face and the future we want to create.
Mhm.
I commit to making a difference in thought, word, and deed
Yeah.
in some way every day.
Mm.
I'll do this with laughter, dedication, integrity, and love because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
What a great, not framework, but what a great perspective to approach this from.
Yeah. It's how I think. I mean, it's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about laughter, and honestly, Jill, this comes up in almost every conversation I have about belonging. People are saying you have to make it fun.
Yeah.
You have to make it enjoyable.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people are just turned off from it.
Too much work. I already got enough
Yeah.
work. Yeah. That's why, I mean, too, that's why I say people have to find their own way of contributing, because it really is personal and you can't pledge to do something that, is awful and sucks the energy out of it. You have to do something that fills you up and brings
Right.
all of you, the good part of you, out.
Right.
Hmm. I'm glad you had it there to read because I don't have it up. And I didn't
No
get
worries.
surprised, but it's how I live. It's what matters to me. So,
Yeah. Well, and it was intentional. Like, you thought about it, you wrote it down, and you put it out there,
hmm.
which I think is so helpful for ensuring you live that way.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, your integrity is a large part of, I think, what draws people to you and lets them feel connected to you. Like, when you engage with someone who doesn't feel authentic, who doesn't feel like they have that integrity,
right.
it's very problematic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I have to tell you one more story because it kind of relates to reading what you just read and the intentionality of it. When I sat down to write my first book, I had it all mapped out. I had a contract, and I had 3 months to write the book.
Right.
But I knew what I was going to write, and I had files for each chapter, and I sat down to write it. It was a book, for those who don't know, is called Selling to Big Companies. And when I wrote it, it was about how to get your foot in the door of big companies that nobody answers the phone, nobody emails you back, that kind of stuff. And I sat down to write the book, and I had read a book called Your Higher Purpose shortly before. And I'd read that totally unrelated to the work that I was doing. But somebody had recommended it to me, so I read it. So I'm starting to write because it's my first day of writing. And I sat down and I went, oh, I should be asking that question. What's my higher purpose in writing this book? And so I did, and immediately said, my higher purpose is to show people how to sell to big companies and win big contracts. Okay. And then suddenly from the back of my brain, something screamed, no, it's not. It's like, I mean, this was not me talking. It was like, whoa, no, it's not. And I just sat there, not knowing, well, if that was what I thought it was. And suddenly a new idea rushed in. And it was that my job was to help people feel that it was possible.
Right.
That's very different. I wrote an entirely different book because of that. And because I knew I came from Xerox, I had great sales training. It was for small, medium businesses. People would say, well, Jill, you've had some of the best sales training in the world, and that's not me. I'm running my own little business. And so instead, my book starts out with my failure and how I lost my business, and I tried to phone people and nobody called me back. And I thought, oh my God, I'm over the hill. I've lost my mojo. And then throughout the whole book, what I did is every time I had something that I wanted to say, here's what you should do, I would tell what I didn't do, or how I screwed it up the first time.
Right.
Learned it, because otherwise they'd say, well, that's easy for you, Jill, but it's
Yep.
not possible for me. So it's funny that what's really possible is something. I mean, that was in 2004. I got the domain name in probably 2006. What's really possible, 2007. And that's part of what's been there the whole time, that my job is to help people feel that it's possible.
Right. Right. And you use vulnerability
Yes.
in kind of creating that
Yes.
connection.
You have to.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. Personally, like
Yes.
they just, you can't expose that, you have fears, insecurities, or you didn't succeed in the past. I think a lot of people feel like you've got to put up that
That area. So
front.
you're the expert. And the truth is, I'm not the
Yeah.
expert. I learned the hard way, like everybody
Right.
does. I just was open about it, and which made so many people feel that, she failed. Oh, I've done that mistake too. I remember a good friend of mine who was reading the book as I was writing it, saying, I can't believe you did that. I thought I was the only one that made that horrible mistake. I mean, this is what I heard from people. But then I showed her
Right.
how. Now, here's what you
Right.
should do. Here's what works. And it changed everything. But you have to
I-
lower that.
in this what's really possible, process or adventure you're on,
Yeah.
have you had any conversations that have not gone well? That you were trying to do that exploration and
Some
people
people,
were just
some people
not
just,
open?
some people just can't.
Right.
They just can't. I mean, there's one way, and that's the only way. Um, yeah, there's some people you can't. I mean, I'd love to say I could open everybody up.
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah.
But you
That's
don't need to open everybody up. You need to. So I don't consider it a failure. I mean, I consider, okay, it doesn't always work, but who can I work with to move things along, and who do I mean, I don't let something like that stop me.
I love it.
Yeah.
You've got the passion for what you're doing and the willingness to keep going even after a bad interaction like that.
Yeah, not always fun, but
Yeah.
mhm,
But it's it's
life.
it's a fact of life
Yes.
for all of
Yeah.
us, you know? You
Yeah.
you will have that conversation with someone at some point where it's just like, "Oh,
Ooh,
oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
Rough."
Mhm.
Um, this has been fantastic. Is there anything about what's really possible that I haven't asked you about that you were hoping I would?
No, I just
Okay.
I'm just like I said, this is the adventure I'm on right now. I would like more people to join the adventure, and like I said, I'm bringing more ideas to the table because I'm really interested in doing something to pull the grandmas into this more, to
Right.
bring their foundation to the world. We need a balance of male and female power. Not everybody
Agreed.
does.
And in terms of ages
Yes,
involved,
yes,
I mean, you
yeah,
look at
yeah.
the leadership in the US and the ages skew,
Totally, but
higher than you, very much so.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. It's like, whoa. And then I mean, I love the young people getting together too, because we need their energy and their ideas. I mean, I'm concerned as a grandma because it's the world I'm going to leave my children's children.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to leave the world in bad shape. I want to leave it I want to leave it so it's they can have a good life, and not worry of, forest fires and running out of this, and you know, legal things. I mean, I feel an obligation as an elder. So,
Yeah.
hmm
I think that's fantastic.
hmm
So I'm assuming we're probably not going to reach a ton of grandmas through podcasting.
no,
So for anyone listening,
no,
get your grandma involved.
yeah. But it's not
What'sreallypossible.com.
only about
I'll
right
put
now.
it in the note.
Yeah. Right now, it's not
Yeah,
just for grandmas. That's an extension and that's a side thing I'm thinking about. What's really possible
totally.
right now is getting people to think about instead of fighting and locking, locking their into their own mindset into how the world has to be. How can we work together? How can we
Yep.
look at what we can create as opposed to how do we fix those horrible things that everybody gets mad about and has their opinion about? But how do we pull them
Right.
together to see
Right.
something bigger and better?
And I'm sure somebody listening will be like, oh my gosh, that's my grandma. Like, I
Yeah,
need to talk about it.
yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. I love this. Jill, thank you so much
Well,
for agreeing to do
thanks
this.
for asking me.
Yeah,
Really,
happy to.
yeah, it's fun to do, and I feel like I'm going to be doing some more of this stuff as I get going, and I'm building a whole new base in my life, and
Right.
this is new to me, and so I'm moving slowly and with trepidation as I move forward into terms of where do I go with all this, and how can I have a bigger impact and spread it out. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Oh, happy to.
letting me.
Happy. I always love chatting with you, Jill. So whether it's on camera, off
Yeah,
camera, it's all good.
thank you.